Hey everyone, welcome to Moving Matt. We do all things cameras with a dash of vlogs and a little bit of travel. And today I'm happy to announce that Panasonic has done a development announcement for the GH6. So I know this is a camera that a lot of people have been looking forward to. And unfortunately a while back, many of us thought that the GH5 Mark II was going to be taking the place of a GH6. But apparently that is not the case, and I know a lot of people are going to be happy about it. So Panasonic did just give a development announcement, so we do not know too much about it yet, but I will go over the specs that we do know, and then we can talk about it. So the first big spec we have is it will do 5.7K at 60 frames per second. So I think that is pretty exciting and definitely a lot better than what we were hearing from the GH5 Mark II. And I also think it's a good spec to help validate the micro four thirds sensor that Panasonic is going to continue to go with the GH5 line or the GH6 line at this point. And speaking of the sensor, it will have a brand new sensor. It will probably be in the 24 megapixel range. The reason I'm saying that is because if they're doing 5.7K, that's kind of how it works out in a micro four thirds sensor. At least that's what I'm hearing. I honestly do not know all the technical breakdowns of how that works, but apparently we'll have somewhere around a 24 megapixel sensor, or at least that's the best guess. It will also shoot 4K 60 at 10-bit 422, which I think is pretty exciting, and it will have no record limits. Now, whether this will have any overheating, not exactly sure, but I'm guessing it will not, especially in the 4K 60 mode. But there is also a 4K 120 mode, and it's shooting at 10-bit as well. I'm guessing it will be at a lower bit rate and probably shoot 420 and not 422. Now, unsurprisingly, with all these features, it will have a brand new processor, and considering it will have all these video features, I'm guessing it will have a fast loadout. And so we will see if that helps with rolling shutter and what that will actually mean for the photo specs. Now we also know, and the last bit of information they gave us, is that it will cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500, or at least that is what they're aiming for. Will it come a little bit below that or a little bit above? I guess we will wait and see. I think with all the manufacturing issues and the chip shortages, they're probably hedging their bets, but they're hoping that the 2,500 mark is where they're going to land. So what's important that we do not know? Well, the glaring thing is we do not know about the autofocus. And by them not mentioning a new autofocusing system, it makes me think they're gonna go with the contrast-based autofocus, and it's probably gonna suck again. Or maybe they'll be able to refine it some, and with this new processor, it will be substantially better. Let's hope, because it needs to be substantially better in order to compete, at least with the Sonys and the Canons. But I am pretty disappointed that it doesn't look like they're gonna go with face detect, but maybe they'll surprise us and they actually are gonna go with a different autofocusing system, and they're just waiting to drop that bomb so that they get a lot more press or a lot more attention when they do say, hey, we actually got a brand new autofocusing system. So that's what I'm crossing my fingers for. But as of now, it doesn't look like they're going to be changing that autofocus, or at least we don't know. The other big thing that we do not know about this camera is if it will have any overheating issues. I would assume at the 4K 60 mark, it will not. And if they are downsampling from that 5.7K, that's pretty impressive, and that's definitely a leg up on the R6 from Canon. And with the higher resolution, it will have a leg up on the Sony a7S III as well. Granted, it is going to have a smaller sensor, so that's probably not going to mean near as good of low light, but we will see. Now, the other big question is, will this have any form of computational video or like a dual gain sensor? I think having that smaller sensor, they definitely want to have some way of protecting the highlights and the shadows and bringing a little bit better low light. One of the biggest problems with a smaller sensor like that is the dynamic range. So if they can do something similar to the way the cell phones do with their dynamic range, it could be very impressive. Now, obviously, cell phones do not have anywhere near the capabilities of this camera with the lens selections or anything like that, but the dynamic range is something they can definitely improve on a micro four thirds sensor. So maybe they can steal a page from Canon's playbook and give you a dual gain sensor, kind of like the C70 and other cinema cameras that come out of Canon. Now, I think a given with this camera is it will have really great IBIS. Panasonic is known for having really good IBIS in general, especially with their smaller sensors. So with that being said, I think if the autofocus is really good, this will be a great camera for run and gun, and will also be good for vloggers. And I think it will actually bite into Sony's market here, especially considering it will be quite a bit cheaper than the Sony a7S III. But a big unknown is, what will Sony offer with the a7 IV? Will it have comparable specs with a larger sensor? and I'm guessing will be priced somewhere in that same neighborhood. But also by the time this thing comes out, which I think a lot of people are predicting September, is it possible that Sony will have dropped the price of the a7S III maybe to around $3,200? I think if they do, it will definitely make the decision a lot harder, and I think some people will actually choose to maybe pay $700 and have the full frame sensor of the Sony a7S III. But what do you think about these specs? Do they make you happy? Do they meet your expectations? What do you think that they can change about these specs that will actually make them even more intriguing for you? Do you think that the autofocus will still be that contrast-based autofocus, or do you think they actually have something up their sleeve and are going to be changing it? Drop in the comment section below and let me know. And if you've liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And until next time, peace.